Well, I'm from Dumbarton. I've lived in Dumbarton all my life.
What's your earliest memory?
I can actually remember being in the pram when I was very young. I was in the pram and I can remember my mother pushing the pram. I can always remember the pram had a canopy that had fringes on it. That was one of my earliest memories. And I can remember my mother pushing me along the high street in Dumbarton in the pram. I was 32 at the time. But, yeah. After I left school, I went to Knoxland Primary School and then Dumbarton Academy. When I left school, my first job was in Ideal Kitchens, Ideal Timbers, that made kitchen units. And I was employed as, and I hate this title, I was employed as a boy labourer. It sounded something like Dickensian,
yes.
But I was in, it was either a boy labourer in Ideal Kitchens, or you could go up a chimney, But and that's what I was. I was a boy labourer in Ideal Kitchens, and I got made redundant after 6 weeks. I got made redundant, and I can always remember my big redundancy payment was £26. That was my big redundancy, £26. Then after that, I got employment as an apprentice central heating engineer, and plumber, and I did that for a few. Well, I did that for 3 years, and then I decided that I wanted big changes. I wanted to do. I didn't always want to be a plumber or a central heating engineer. I wanted something maybe a wee bit different. So I applied to join the fire service and got into the fire brigade. Did my basic training at the Scottish Fire Service School at Gullane in East Lothian, and then I got stationed to Helensburgh Fire Station. I was in Helensburgh Fire Station as an operational firefighter for 19 years. Operational firefighter means I went to fires and road accidents, all the things you'd expect a firefighter to do. I did that for 19 years, and then I got promoted. I applied for promotion and I got it, and I became a fire safety officer. And I was then stationed in Dumbarton, and my job was to teach people about fire safety. That was my job. I worked predominantly with school children, but my job was to speak to people, anybody that wanted to speak about fire safety. That was my job. Covered a huge area. My area to cover as a fire safety officer was from Clydebank to the Inner Hebrides, which was a huge area to cover. And it was a fabulous job. I enjoyed every minute of it, because it got me out and about and seen quite a lot of. I worked mostly in Argyll and the Inner Hebrides, and as I say, I worked predominantly with school children. I worked with children from nursery school up until young adults to say secondary school children. That was my job, to teach them about fire safety. But we also spoke to adult groups as well. Anyone that wanted to speak about fire safety, that was my job.
Okay. Now, how long did you do that job for?
In fire safety? I did that job right up until I got sick, until I got ill. So I was in fire safety from, I'm trying to think of dates now, but I was in fire safety for at least 5 years until I got sick.
And what actually happened, Chris?
What happened at Miltonspell? The first thing that happened to me was I began to shake quite a lot on my left-hand side, a tremor, and my wife said that I should really go to the doctor about that, and I went to my doctor, and the doctor said yes. He says that's unnatural, because it was just on the left-hand side of my body that I started to shake. And it used to do it even in my sleep. I would constantly shake on the left-hand side. And sometimes if I was to get agitated, it used to become quite violent, So my doctor sent me for an MRI scan. And I went for that, and then I got called back to the hospital, and they said they'd found a problem with your MRI scan. And I had a colloid cyst in the cerebral canal of my brain. And I spoke to the consultant there, the brain surgeon, and he said the only way, he says, what we'll have to do is we'll have to take the cyst out. And so I had brain surgery to remove this colloid cyst. The colloid cyst was about the size and shape of a kidney bean, and it was sitting in my cerebral canal, and they had to take it out, and they did it through the top of my head, which I found. And I was speaking to the consultant, and he says, because I asked him, I mean, when we were talking about brain surgery, I says, how are you going to do this? And he says, well, I'll probably do it through the top of your head. He says, just go in through the top of your head. What they'll do is they'll open your head, go at your skull, crack your skull open, go in through your skull, go into your cerebral canal, pull out the cyst, and then patch your skull back up again. And I thought, this sounds absolutely wonderful, this. So it does, you know. And he said, but I've still to look at your scans again. He says, I'm going to have another look at your scans. He says, if I can't get it through the top of your head, he says, I can do it through your nose. And I found this really alarming, because I thought, wait a minute, you're going to go into my skull and take a cyst out through my nose, which I found a bit scary. But I went in and got it done. I was out of the hospital in less than a week. My head was all shaved, and I had the big scars. I had 19 metal clips holding my head together, but they took them out, which was an ordeal to get the clips out, because they had kind of sealed over a bit, and it was quite painful getting them out because they were stuck, you know. But that was fine. Got it. It had been done, and I had a long time in recovery, but I was back home again, and eventually I got back to work. The only thing is that because of the surgery, they took my driving licence off me, which means that a big part of my job was driving to travel about, and now, although I was back at work, I was desk bound. I had to answer the phones and things like that, which I didn't like that. I didn't like flying a desk. I wanted back to the job that I loved, travelling, talking to people, lecturing on fire safety. That's the job that I loved, and everything was fine. But I was back at work anyway. I was quite happy. My wife works full time. Everything was okay, and because of where I lived, I could walk from my house to Dumbarton Fire Station, where my office was, and that was fine. And then one morning, I was walking to work, and I was crossing a very busy road, the A82. I was crossing the A82, and I collapsed. I collapsed, fell, cracked my head on concrete. What I didn't know at the time, what had caused me to fall, was I'd had a cerebral hemorrhage. I'd taken a brain hemorrhage. And I was then taken from the accident scene, I was taken to the Vale of Leven Hospital. I was taken there, which was accident emergency at the time. I was taken there, and the doctor that examined me in A&E saw the scar on my head from my brain surgery and said, there's something wrong, this guy's had major brain surgery recently. And it was touch and go at that time, because they had to get me into a resus, because I was really starting to fade at that time. My wife works in that hotel, but works in that hospital. So they got, because I'd asked for my wife, you know, they got my wife, and the doctor, it was in A&E, says no. He says, this is a job for the Southern General, and they took me to the Southern General Hospital, and my wife came in the ambulance as well, and they discovered that the doctor that examined me in the Southern General was the same doctor that took the cyst out. And he said to my wife, he says he has I had a massive hematoma in the frontal lobe of my brain. And the doctor says, he's got a massive hematoma in the frontal lobe of his brain. He says, I'm going to operate just now. He says, to see if we can relieve that. And he says, and we'll do what we're best. He says, and he said to my wife, he says, there is a problem. He says, your husband might not survive this operation. He says, I've got to tell you that. But they did it anyway. And I survived the operation. The operation took between 8 and 9 hours for the operation to get it done. And then obviously I was in hospital. But then I got a lot of complications. After I'd had the operation, I got meningitis. And another condition, I got hydrocephalus. I got meningitis and I got hydrocephalus. The superbug at that time was on the go, MRSA. I got that twice. And then I was a very poor person, very poor. I was very ill at that time. I'm a big chap. At that time, I'd been in hospital so long, my weight had dropped to 6.5 stone, which is a very, for someone my size to be at 6.5 stone. I was 6.5 stone, and eventually my wife, because my wife spoke to the doctors in the Vale Hospital and said, I'm watching my husband dying here in a hospital bed. And she says, that's not right. She says, I'm watching my husband dying in a hospital bed. And the doctor, he says, Roy, he says, I'm aware of the drastic weight loss of your husband. And he says, I'm now going to start artificially feeding him, peg feeding him. So they started peg feeding me artificially. And my wife was doing things like she was bringing these Complan drinks and she was trying to spoon that into my mouth to try and sort of build me up a bit. Yeah? But after a while, my wife, she was onto the internet and she was looking for help. And she found a place called the Central Scotland Brain Rehabilitation Unit at Bonkle, through at Wishaw. And my wife phoned the manager of the Brain Rehabilitation Unit and says, I'm phoning on behalf of my husband. She says he's in desperate need of help. And the manager of the Brain Rehabilitation Unit, she says, where is he? And my wife says, he's in the Vale of Leaven Hospital. And she says, well, I'll come out to the Vale of Leaven Hospital and have a look at him. She came out to the Vale of Leaven Hospital and had a look at me. A lady called Anne Hunter, who was at that time, in fact I think she still is, was the manager of the Brain Rehabilitation Unit. She came and had a look at me, and she says, right, and she was doing things like, she would take a ball, she had a ball, and she was talking to me all the time, and she'd say, what is this, Chris? You know, and she'd say things like, is it okay to call you Chris, you know? And she'd holding the ball in front of me, and said, can you touch the ball? And if I went to get it, she would move it away, you know, and I thought, yeah, that was just sodgy, you know, what are you doing this to me for, you know? When I was in the brain Rehabilitation Unit, my wife spoke to one of the nurses, it was a male nurse, and I hadn't been speaking, I hadn't spoke for 7 or 8 months, I hadn't spoke. And my wife had said to this chap, she said, will you do me a favour? And he said, what is it? And she said, could you shave Chris? She says, he's really needing a shave. And he said, yes, he says, I can shave him if you want. And she says, and he says, he says, anything at all to do with Chris. He says, I'm his nurse. He says, I'll shave him. So this chap comes in and he starts shaving me, right? But my face is shaved, by the incidentally, you know. What? And he started to shave me. And the soap and whatnot, and he's shaving away. I'm trying to remember his name now. Can't remember his name, but he was shaving me anyway. And I'm sort of sitting there, And he says to me, he says, "Ah, well, Chris," he says, because he's talking while he's shaving me. And he says, "Well, Chris," he says, "I hear you're a fireman, you know." "Aye, I've been told you're a big fireman, you know." And I turned around, I hadn't spoke for months. And I turned around and I said to him, I says, "Firefighter." And he looked at me and he says, "So, Chris, did you speak?" I says, "You called me a fireman." He says, "Aye." He says, "I thought you were a fireman." I says, "No, firefighter, gender free. You know, we have women in the job now, you know." And he said, and he put down the razor, he says, "Chris," he says, "I need to go and tell people you're speaking, you know." And that was me back speaking again. And I haven't shut up since. They decided that I was well enough to go home at the weekends. And that was a big bonus to me. My wife had actually taken photographs of my house, from outside and inside. Photographs of my living room, my dining room, my bedroom, and my garden, just to remind me. And this was all done with, the staff at the Brain Rehabilitation Unit suggested that she took photographs to prompt me. And then when I started getting home, it was a huge bonus to go home. And I used to go home on a Friday and stay for the Saturday, and I'd go back to the unit on a Sunday. So, and then I started going home every weekend until eventually it was decided that what I had to do at home was I had to get alterations made to my house. They had to put a downstairs toilet into my house so that I didn't have to run up and down the stairs all the time. So they put a new downstairs toilet in. They had to put railings in the garden so that I didn't fall. So I've got railings. You can't move in my garden without hitting a railing. They put railings in my garden. They took my staircase out and put a new staircase in. They took the staircase out because of my big feet. I've got size 11 feet. So they took the staircase out and increased the stairs, put a bigger tread on the stairs so that I could get up and down the stairs. And then they put more railings, another banister, so that I could at each side to go up and down the stairs. And then they took my front garden away. My front garden was taken away, and a drive was put in for the car.
You're a very articulate person, Chris. You're very able, you know. And tell us a bit about BN, because you are one of the, you tell us about BN.
BN, Brain Injury Experience Network, is a group of people who have at some time or another suffered a brain injury. I, myself, and another chap, Stephen Diamond, and another lady, Sandra, who's actually dead now, she's actually deceased, were the founder members of BN. And that's what it was, a group of people who have suffered at one time a brain injury, and not just so much for the person himself, but for the families too, so that everybody had something in common. They could go and talk about their conditions, or what help they get, who they get it from, and BN. And we do things like we go to theatre visits. We go out on trips. We were very fortunate to last year, the year before, we got a lottery grant to fund the trips and things like that, and it's worked, you know.
So you were away on the fishing trip a few weeks
I was away on the fishing trip, and yes, indeed, I was the only person that caught a fish. Yes, and it was a rainbow trout, and I caught it, and that night I ate that rainbow trout, and very nice it was too. I didn't go and blag Trout or for other people. Andy McLeod. No.
Okay. So, BN, tell us about how BN operates. First of all, what is your role in BN, and how does BN operate?
My role in BN at this current time, I am the chairperson of BN. This is my second year of being the chairperson. We had an AGM, and it was decided that those that held the offices were re-elected, which I was quite happy about because I like being the chair of BN.
Tell me how the good news, bad news thing goes.
Well, normally when at the start of each meeting, just in the off chance that there are new members there, we always have an introduction where everybody says what their name is and an item of recent good news or bad news. And it's really just, the good news and bad news is just, it's really just an icebreaker for anyone who's new to the group. And we always go through this good news and bad news, you know. And everybody's, you can always think of something, you know, for your good news and your bad news, you know. But as I say, that's usually just the icebreaker. And we have the meeting, any other business and any news or possible trips that were going on, and then we always stop and have a tea or coffee and cakes and biscuits and things like that. We usually have these meetings at Cafe Connect in Bruce Street in Dumbarton, and that's basically it.
Right, so Chris, if you could go back and talk to yourself 11 years ago when you were just starting to come round from after this brain injury, what advice would you give yourself?
What advice I give myself? Advice I give myself is treat every day and enjoy every minute of the day as if it's your last. Because I didn't want what happened to me, but it did. And you never know what's round the corner. That's the way I look at it.
And what are your hopes for the future?
My hopes for the future are to continue to be a survivor, to help other people survive, and the fact that I survived, so you can too. And that's the way I look at it. I have a complete and utter different outlook at life now, that I might, I mean, I have survived, and I've spoke to my own GP and my own doctors and things like that, and I'm very much aware of the fact that I survived an illness which in all accounts should have killed me, but it didn't. I survived against virtually unbelievable odds. I survived an illness that should have killed me, but I survived it. And I'm quite happy about being a survivor. That's the way I look at it, you know. I'm a survivor. I'm not a poor soul, I'm a survivor.
You no longer are employed by the fire service,
no.
But
I now work voluntary for the fire service. I'm back in uniform again, and I'm a volunteer. The Retired Employees Association, the REA, Retired Employees Association, where I'm actually recognised as an ambassador for Strathclyde Fire and Rescue, and I will go out and talk to any group that wants to talk about fire safety, especially disabled groups. I go and lecture at Momentum in Glasgow, and I will talk about my own experiences and my experiences as being an operational firefighter and being an officer, a fire safety officer. But I'm back now working voluntary for Strathclyde Fire and Rescue as a fire safety ambassador.
Does that mean a lot to you?
It means a great deal to me. Even putting the uniform back on, and to put I've been decorated for my years in the fire service. I have got the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal, which you get after being a serving officer for 20 years. I have that. I also have the Queen's Jubilee Medal as well, and I get to wear those ribbons on my uniform, which means a great deal to me. And I also have the 9/11, the Twin Towers. I have the 9/11 pin, which I wear as well.
In your opinion, what are the key things that people need to start rebuilding their lives after an injury such as yours?
The key things. The most important thing for me is getting people to understand you personally, me personally, getting to people to understand you, how you're feeling and what you want. You need help. You will always need help. If you've got a brain injury, you will always need help. I've been very, very fortunate that I have a caring and loving family who have been with 100% beside me for everything. And it didn't matter how I was feeling or what, just to I mean, some of the things that, well, I did a very caring and loving family, my wife especially, who has been me 100% beside me. And if it wasn't for my wife, I would probably not have survived my illness. I know that I owe her my life. But that's the most important thing. And the most important thing is, for a long time during the early parts of my illness, I was frustrated and upset because I thought nobody's listening to me. Or people, you'd be sitting you'd be lying in a hospital bed and people were talking about you, around about you. And I often thought, wait a minute, I've got a voice here.